It's disingenuous. Honestly, it feels a little too close to a lie. I had this video come across my feed the other day, and I knew I wanted to talk to you about it because it touches on something that I try to communicate to you about. I want to give you the information that you need in order to make informed decisions. And this video, it feels like it fed right into the whole like, well, it's Disney, it's perfect, right? Mindset that, if you fall into that whole thing, it's no big deal if this is a vacation. But it is a big deal if what we're talking about is moving your entire family and buying a house. Now, without playing the video for you, because quite frankly, I'm not new here, I know that there are plenty of people out there just itching to tear someone limb for limb, whether it's this person or me, and I'm not out for blood, nor am I interested in facilitating your need for it. I am, however, going to tell you what this person was getting at. So this is a real estate agent saying, why not move to the bubble? Stop vacationing. Actually move here. Because on any given day, your lunch shift could look a little something like this. And she took us to the park, grabbed some lunch, did a little wandering around, and then wrapped it up by saying you could still be home in time for your afternoon meetings. Now look, my opinion, as someone who not only lives near Walt Disney World, but lives incredibly close, I'm 3 miles away, is that this is, I won't say it's bullshit, but I will say that it's a fairy tale. Or if nothing else, disingenuous with a side of very flexible work hours. And look, I want to talk a little bit more about this. I want to touch on some of the things that this person is completely ignoring. I want to clear up some of the misconceptions that people have about moving to the Orlando area, especially when the goal is to live near Walt Disney World specifically, and help clear the pixie dust out of the eyes of so many who consider a move down here because they're still high off the vacation vibes, even though they've already returned home. Because look, this isn't a vacation decision, it's a life decision. And Disney magic, it ain't gonna cut it when we're talking about a mortgage and a 9-to-5. Before we go any further, I'm gonna put a disclaimer right here, all right? Because I know there are some people watching who have the attention span of a gnat and they're never gonna make it to the end of the video. I like living here. I love living in this type of environment. I love living in a place that has all of the things that this place and places like it have. It's why we moved here to begin with. But that doesn't stop me from being aware of both the pros and the cons of living in a place like this. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the reason I can enjoy a place like this the way that I do is that I'm aware of the cons and I understand that the pros outweigh them for me. So yes, I love living here. I enjoy living here. This is not the first tourist attraction, hotspot / vacation destination that I've ever lived in. I moved here by choice. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So I'm not gonna actually go through the video itself and the concepts in this particular video line by line, because there are a lot of things that I think kind of get glossed over and completely ignored. But I am going to talk to you about some of the things that I think you should be considering before you just like jump headfirst into even researching a move to the greater Orlando area, again, specifically to live near Walt Disney World. That said, this applies to not only living in this specific area, tourist hotspots, vacation destinations, places like this where people go to vacation are all gonna share similar themes. So even if you're not like wanting to move to Disney, you wanna move somewhere else, this is all gonna apply in a similar way. So I've pulled together kind of a short list of things that I think you need to be aware of, some topics that I want to hit on, and hopefully this can help clear up some of those misconceptions. And we're starting with one that I think is probably the biggest misconception. It's the thing that get people into the most trouble when they decide to move to a place. And that is that vacationing in a place is not the same as living in that place. You know, something that not enough people recognize or acknowledge is that when you're visiting a place on vacation, what you're experiencing is a tourist's version of that place. Even if you're doing things that are off the beaten path, if you're not actually living in that place, you're not really experiencing it in the same way as someone who lives there will. And of course, right, like so many of the things that you do day to day, you simply aren't doing when you are vacationing in a place or when you're traveling to a place temporarily. Things like work, laundry, you may or may not be doing with the same frequency as you would be doing it at home. I know that's a silly example, but it's still true. School schedules, all of that stuff, the stuff that you're probably trying to escape every time you travel, that comes with you when you move to this place in a way that it doesn't come with you when you're traveling or vacationing. And sure, there are definitely things that you might be escaping from. Cold weather, for example, if we're talking about Florida, you know, you're not going to get a blizzard down here. You're not going to get that thick sheet of ice that you get up in the Midwest down here at any point. But you are trading that off for other things: hurricanes, severe thunderstorms, cockroaches, lizards. Which kind of brings me to a reoccurring theme, something that I mentioned earlier in our little disclaimer there. There are pros and cons to everything. And you're going to have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about if a move to this place is right for you. And I'm going to give you a little tip here, okay? I know this is going to sound like I'm saying to focus on the negative. That's not really what I'm trying to say, but bear with me. I want you to think about the negative. I want you to, in every thought that you're having about moving to this place, think about the downside. Not because I want you to focus on it, not because I want you to fixate on it. We don't want to focus or fixate on the negatives. We want to think about a move because it's going to improve our life in some way. But we have to acknowledge that those cons, those negatives are there so that we can decide if the pros outweigh them. If we ignore them, they do not go away. They are most definitely still here. And I personally have found that when you ignore something or you're completely unaware of it, it ends up being worse after the fact than it would be if you said, yeah, you know, cockroaches are a thing. Those lizards, they are a thing. But I sure do like the sunshine. To that same point, another thing that you really want to be aware of is that there's an entire identity to Florida, just like there's an entire identity to the place that you live now that you're probably going to be completely unaware of. You may never even experience some elements of it if you're just vacationing, if you're just traveling here temporarily. And I mean, this is even more true if you're someone who's vacationing to Walt Disney World and your entire vacation is spent inside the bubble. Things like politics, crime, population density, language barriers, that can definitely be a thing down here as well. HOAs, laws. These are all things that exist here like they exist everywhere. But depending on who you are and where you're coming from, it might be better here or it might be worse. So this is another thing to be aware of, take into consideration, do some looking into before you settle on moving here because it's going to be magical. Because again, these are things that you will absolutely be dealing with. Another thing that you really have to come to terms with, and I know this is going to sound super negative, but I'm not being negative, I'm just being real. I know, it's hard to believe. It's that if you decide to move here and your goal is to live as close to Disney as possible, it's important to recognize that all of the things you want to avoid when you're on vacation, the crowds, the prices, the traffic, that's going to be part of your day-to-day life. Yeah, you're going to be dealing with that 24/7, 365. The Walt Disney World Resort on its own is one of the world's most popular and most visited vacation destinations. That means literally millions of people visit that location, that one spot alone every year. And that's not even taken into consideration the people who visit other areas nearby that are also very popular and high trafficked that they need to pass through this area in order to get to. That is also part of it. The closer you move to the Walt Disney World Resort, the harder it is to avoid all of those things, the harder it is to find yourself in a little pocket of peace. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible. It's not. But still, if you have to venture out, you have to go to the pharmacy, you have to go to the grocery store, you have to do the things that people do day to day, you're gonna find yourself in the belly of the beast really quickly. Now, this isn't all bad. Again, there are pros and cons. There are trade-offs. You have to decide what's worth it for you. But one thing that is really important to recognize is that your life, wherever it is that you are now, you're not gonna be able to plug and play once you get here. You're gonna have to adjust. You're gonna have to learn some things about the area. You're gonna have to learn to move with it in the appropriate way in order to avoid the things that you want to avoid. You know, one of the first things that I tell people when they ask about moving to a place like this is that you have to be willing to learn this place, and you have to be willing to adjust your lifestyle, because it's going to take longer to get to places than you're expecting it will. This kind of speaks directly to my whole issue with the your lunch break could look like this thing that got us having this conversation today. It also takes longer to do things at certain locations during certain times. Think about that quick run to Walmart or Target. Well, what day of the week is it? Is there a cheerleading competition in town? What Walmart are we talking? Is it around check-in time? These are all things that you become very familiar with the longer that you live here. You know, especially if you're living right near Walt Disney World, if your goal is as close to the magic as possible, your definition of close is going to change. The closer you are to Walt Disney World or that vacation destination, that tourist hub, the farther away you are from real life things. Think a hardware store, for example, or a dealership that you want to take your car to get regular maintenance done. Is that a big deal? No, not really. But does it require some adjustment? Yeah, definitely. Another thing that you might not realize while you're perusing Google Maps from the comfort of wherever it is that you're hanging out now, but you definitely will realize this once you move here, if you so choose to move here, is that just because something is close doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to meet your needs as someone who lives here. So Walmart is a fantastic example of this. Like, you might want to go to Walmart to get your groceries done because it's a cheap place to get groceries, but the Walmart nearest you might not be the best option. And maybe it's because it's just so busy given that it is so close and that's where most of the tourists go. Maybe it's because all the affordable options are always sold out because that's what the tourists are opting for. Maybe it's because what they stock is more geared towards the tourists, the vacationers, the people who are just passing through than it is for someone like yourself who lives here. So it might be within, 10 minutes, but the Walmart that is 30 minutes away is the one that's going to meet your needs much better, or you're going to opt for a more expensive option. When we talk grocery stores, an example of this might be like Publix. It's right across the street, so it is super close, but it's not known for having the best deals, Again, as I've said ad nauseum, it's a trade-off. Proximity is another thing that we need to dig in a little bit more to. Something that people get very wrong when they talk about Walt Disney World in this way, referencing it as a point on the map that they're considering moving next to, is they think about it as like one kind of isolated place, like they're considering moving next to their local mall, when in reality, Walt Disney World is 40 square miles. It's massive. So it's much more accurate to think about a move to Walt Disney World like a move to the outskirts of a nearby city, because that is ultimately what it is. It's a city in and of itself. And so when you consider that and you think about driving from, the two farthest corners of Walt Disney World could take 20 minutes on any given day, not accounting for traffic, you gotta consider that living near Disney might not mean living in as close a proximity to the most magical place on earth as you're envisioning. In reality, you're probably living 20 to 30 minutes out in most cases, depending on where exactly you live and where exactly you're headed to on Walt Disney World property, not to mention traffic. And that is most definitely closer than wherever it is you live right now. But when we start to try and convince ourselves that we'll be able to just pop into Magic Kingdom for lunch, well, that's probably a bad example. Magic Kingdom has pretty bad food. Just pop into Animal Kingdom for lunch, stroll for a bit, and then make our way home before our afternoon meetings, it paints a very different picture. Now, that's not to say that you can't live closer than that. You certainly can. I do. And while, yeah, there are absolutely parts of Walt Disney World that I can get to in under 10 minutes, I think it's quite the stretch to suggest that you can, make it to Walt Disney World, even living as close as I do, get through the toll plaza, park the car, walk through the parking lot, get through security, walk to the turnstiles, get through the turnstiles, and then get to wherever it is that you want to grab a bite, wait in line for that, get your order, eat it, and stroll out to repeat the entire process again in an hour or less. Which I think is another blind spot. It's another one of those things that people who stay inside the bubble don't always consider. If you're like me prior to moving here and you only ever stay on property, you only ever use Disney transportation, you might not realize the whole process that comes before actually getting to the park and what that looks like. So that's why it feels so disingenuous to me to be like, you could just live here and you could just pop in, as though the point from even just the toll plaza to the turnstiles alone can be this entire epic journey that you may never have experienced. But that's just another reason that I think digging a little bit deeper into proximity is important, and getting a better understanding of what exactly we're talking about when it comes to proximity to the parks and the context as well. Now, here in a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the things that I think you need to do if you're seriously considering a move down here. But I do want to toss this in because it makes sense in this section of our conversation. I do think that the best way to get a sense of proximity and understand all of what we're talking about here is to drive around during your next visit. Even if you wouldn't consider renting a car, rent a car. Even if you're staying on property, go through the motions of driving to the theme parks that you're visiting, especially if visiting the theme parks when you live here is a priority for you. See what that looks like. See how that feels. Drive out to that neighborhood, town, city that you're considering. Just see what it looks like with your own eyes, not just relying on Google Maps or YouTube videos. And then drive back to the Walt Disney World Resort and see what that looks like. Like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about this type of thing here in a second. But first, I want to get into one last thing that we need to address when it comes to all of this. And I'm not entirely sure how to articulate this, so bear with me, but if you're considering a move to the Walt Disney World area, if you're considering a move down here, you have to recognize that there are a lot of people who are afraid to say out loud that the emperor has no clothes. They moved here because Disney, in their mind, Disney is perfect. And so even though they're not happy with this, that, or the other, they would never admit it out loud because they don't want to talk negatively about this thing that they so desperately need to be the best thing they've ever done. This is true when it comes to so many things centered around Disney and the Walt Disney World Resort. I see this all the time because what I do is I share real information. I don't hold back. I talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. And I catch a lot of flack for it because people don't want to acknowledge anything that isn't perfect. But you know what? If you're talking about moving to a place, if you're talking about uprooting your entire family and setting down roots somewhere completely different, we need to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, you gotta think with your brain, not just with your heart. Now, I don't mention this to wag my finger at Disney fans at all. I too am a fan of Disney. I like visiting the theme parks. It's kind of what I enjoy when it comes to Disney. But I mention this because it can be really, really easy to see nothing but positives, and that can make it really hard to get a well-rounded view of what it means to move to a place or what exactly that place is when you peel away all of the vacation vibes and you inject some of the real life that you will be experiencing when you move here, because it's real life when you move here. And so you have to go into this, into all of your research and all of that. You have to go in knowing that people are going to try and sound overly positive about things because that is the nature of the topic that is Disney. But to that same point, there are people who are just overly negative. I'm not talking about some of the things that aren't super amazing, but I'm talking about people who are like, I hate it here, this sucks, everything is terrible, there's nothing good. My take, because I have seen this many times in the past, is that this comes from not getting that well-rounded view that I'm trying to give you when it comes to this particular topic. You know, this comes from people who were kind of hoodwinked into believing that everything's perfect down here and it's a vacation every day because it's near Disney. And then when things go wrong, especially when little things go wrong, it seems catastrophic because they weren't ready for it to begin with. I want to help you avoid getting to that point. That's kind of the goal of everything that we do here. And so I think the best way to do that is to be real about it, you know, to sit here and say, yeah, these are the good things, these are the bad things. Okay, so we've talked about a number of things that I think you need to be aware of, you need to consider. We've cleared up some misconceptions, hopefully. Now I want to talk about some of the things that I think you should do if right now you're feeling like, no, seriously, I want to move forward with this. Some of the things that I think you need to do next. First and foremost, you got to get boots on the ground here outside the bubble. You got to rent a car. You got to drive around. Best case scenario, you do it during a busy time of year. I know what you're thinking. Well, why would I want to do that? If you wouldn't want to do it on your vacation during a, 2 or 3 day stretch, then you're certainly not going to want to do it every day, every year for the rest of the length of your time here in the state. If you're going to commit, you need to know what you're committing to. And this type of super busy, tourist heavy traffic everywhere, oh my God, no one knows what they're doing thing is part of it. Something else that's definitely worth your time, since you're going to be here driving around anyway, take a look at some of those neighborhoods that you're considering or wander around some of those cities that you've had your eye on. Windermere seems good. Go spend a day in Windermere. Go to places that you might be going normally. The local grocery store, the local park. Celebration on your list of places to live? Go check it out. Drive the streets. See the local farmers market or whatever else they've got going on. What do the neighborhoods look like, especially when it's overcast or raining? I know that this is one of those things that you can't always control, but it's worth doing because the sunshine can be deceiving. It can make places we'd never consider living look doable because, when that sun is shining and the sky is blue, ooh. Not all prep requires being here in Florida, though. Something that you can do from the comfort of your own home, wherever it is that you happen to be right now, is follow some of the local news, not only in Florida in general, but also in the specific areas, those cities, towns, even neighborhoods that you're considering. Follow the governor, see what he has to say, see what he's talking about, see if you can get a sense of what the politics are in this place that you're considering calling home. Keep an eye on the news. Not only for what's going on day to day, but especially when a natural disaster blows through, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's wildfires, which are currently happening in Florida at the time of recording this. Are these things sure to happen? No, not necessarily. Do they happen? Absolutely. And they impact different places in different ways. So keep eyes on those places, especially the places that you're considering moving to. See what it's like. Is it an area that regularly floods? How quick is the response? Again, think about the things that you keep an eye out for wherever it is that you live, and keep an eye out for similar things in this place that you're considering calling home. I think that this is all a pretty good place to start, but the reality of the situation is you'll never really know 100% until you make the move. And so, if you've done all this and you've considered that this is something you still want to do, make the move, see what happens. My recommendation, rent a place for a bit. Make sure that this is the right fit before you invest in buying a home. I think that that's a really, really important next step as opposed to going all in, but you do you. But when all is said and done, I know I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again, especially for those of you who are like, you don't say anything nice. I love living here. I think that it's the perfect place for me. It's the perfect place for us. Now, does that mean that there aren't things that I could do without? Traffic, crowds, a list of other things. Yeah, there are some things that I could do without, but all of the things that I love about this place outweigh that. I love the weather. I love the diversity of this state, just the number of environments that you have, all in such close proximity. I mean, it's pretty impressive. There's a variety here that you just don't get in other places that I've been to, and I've been to a few. And more than anything else, I love being in a place that people want to be, which is something that, it's hard to articulate what exactly that feels like, but if you've ever lived in a place where people just hate everything about their life and their environment, you'll know what I mean. Does that mean that there aren't downsides? No. Does that mean that this is going to be a good fit for everybody? Absolutely not. But it is a good fit for me. And what's important is that you figure out if it's the right fit for you. But I think that's about it. My goodness, I feel like I talked your ear off. I'm sorry about that, but this is just one of those topics. There's a lot to cover. So, I'm sure that there are things that I forgot. Feel free to put your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, good luck. Good luck with the decision-making process. And if you decide to go through with it, we wish you the best.